what's working so that maybe you can repeat it instead of starting over, reinventing the wheel. Looking at past success, always a good idea. As the saying goes, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of Quickmail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emails.sell.com.
In today's spontaneous episode, I invited Jack to take a look at my newly built cold email campaign. You'll see how he uncovers and challenges some of my assumptions to get to the root of what I did and why. So in this episode, you'll learn how I prospected 250 founded SaaS founders in a single afternoon, why I'm not so concerned about the copy of my email, and how I intend to improve my messaging as the campaign unfolds. Enjoy. So here's where I want to start. I want to give you a little bit of context. We've been doing this podcast for like 2 years. Absolutely love, doing this podcast with you, Jack. You're an amazing co-host. And lots of good things. But at the same time, I also want to create a second podcast. First of all, because I love doing podcasting, and also because I love talking to other founders. And also I really love our dynamic here, talking about a subject together and then exploring and then going into finer details of things. I also like to network with other people, and I figured out podcasting is a great way of doing that. So I decided to create another podcast just specifically for SaaS founders, so people that are, in my sort of position, and basically have a founder-to-founder discussion and exploration. Will be a different format, different vibes anywhere, but obviously needs to reach out to people. And I got a few people in my network already, but I want to reach out to other people in a more automated way.
And don't worry, guys. Just because Jeremy's starting a second podcast doesn't mean he's leaving us. I won't let him go that easily. So nothing to worry about here. So, okay, that said, tell us your approach. So this is going to be a classic cold email. You've never engaged with these prospects before?
That's entirely correct. Starts from scratch. And I think that's why it could be an interesting cast for everyone here, starting from zero.
Oh, well, hold on. Before we go any further, what's the name of your new podcast? Does it have a name yet? Can people find it?
Okay, the name for now is SaaS Founders, but you suggested SaaS Stories. I like that too. So it's not really defined yet, 100%. But we'll let the listener know in case they're interested in the future.
What I want to know, who are you reaching out to? Maybe that's a stupid question because you're reaching out to SaaS founders. Any other criteria?
That's exactly right. I'm going after SaaS founders and figure out where can I actually find, SaaS founders. One website I know is allowing me to filter on that, and it's angel.co. So I went to angel.co, enter that filter about I want SaaS founders, because there were a lot of results and I didn't want to reach out to sort of wannabes, people just starting their company and stuff like that. I decided to select for SaaS companies who receive funding.
Ooh, the dark side of funding.
Yeah, I know, especially I'm bootstrapped, so it's kind of a different spin on that one, but it's still interesting. And so I sorted by founding, invert, so I got the one who got funded first. And I think I scraped 400 of them. So I got the company name at this stage, nothing more.
Okay, so when you sorted by inverted, does that mean you sorted by most funding to least?
That's correct, yeah.
Got you. Okay, cool. So you're going after the big fish first. You're basically hoping for a home run right off the bat.
That's actually a good assumption. I'm not expecting people to tell me no too many times or too much, but also that if I go after the big names first and they tell me no, that gives me time to come back 6 months later and do an intelligent persistence, which is come back to them again and say, since last time, we got this person and this person on the show, is that something you'll be able to reconsider, or is now a better time? And I think I love, I'm a big fan of establishing persistence in a very positive way. And I think that is a good example of that right there.
Interesting. So just to play devil's advocate or just show another idea of reaching out, what I usually like to do if I'm starting from scratch is first reach out to the companies that I'm most similar with, because I've found, if they share my city, if we're basically, maybe not competitors, but if we have a lot of similarities, we can kind of get along well right off the bat. And what's kind of cool is like I've found if you can get, let's say, 5 people on the show, or if you're looking to grow business, if you can get 5 somewhat recognizable customers, then you can leverage that as you go after bigger and bigger and bigger customers or guests on a podcast. But persistence definitely works. I'm just showing one other side of it. This is still cool.
I agree. I totally agree. I could start with just a network of people I know and then go after them. At the same time, I know them. I'm doing a podcast for people I don't know.
There you go.
So you're absolutely right. Your approach works even better in that sense. But for me, it doesn't really work in the case of that podcast specifically.
But we should call my approach the snowball approach and yours maybe the home run approach. But both are cool.
The home run usually never works, but we'll say the persistence approach. Or the annoying kid coming back without the annoying, of course.
All right. So we've got our audience. Now talk to us about your approach here. What are you asking them in these emails?
Hold on a second. We're quite far from that. I think our listener would like to know how I move from the name of a company to the actual email of that person I can send email to.
Fair enough. Let's see this process here. Outline it out, painstaking detail for us. I want to copy your approach.
I'm not even sure if I should, honestly. Should I? Should I go for it, Jack?
Yeah, we need to hear it. Let's go.
All right.
Are you honestly asking? I want to hear it.
I'm honestly asking. Oh, you do want to hear it. Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. I think it's the same process that we have more or less.
Yeah.
So I got the company name and actually the domain. Luckily for me, Angel Coders actually also provide the domain. So
super helpful.
So I got the name of the company, I got the domain, and then what I did next is use the extension of Clearbit to automatically figure out who is a CEO or founder at that company. So basically, they have an API.
And that's Clearbit Connect, right?
Yes, that's correct. Use Clearbit Connect with a brand new Gmail account because otherwise they're just, grabbing all your contact details for enriching their own database. So anyway, you've been warned. So use the new one and basically just try different combinations like first name dot last name at, and then you add the company name. Once you got that Clearbit Connect, you can effectively get the actual people that are in certain positions, like either a CEO or sales, marketing. So for me, it's simple. It's a CEO. Usually there is one in most cases. So it's fairly easy to find out. And once I got the CEO, then I try different variation of the email to make sure that
But on the Clearbit Connect, you just type in the domain, tell the job title that you're looking for, and then you get like 100 free credits a month, and it will give you the actual email. Was there a workaround that you saw?
That's right, except that it's taking too long for 400 people. So basically, I did a script to actually do it automatically.
All right. We're hacking here. So we've got our emails. Cool. What is next?
Next is to clean up your emails. You don't want to spend time on prospect who will bounce. So once we got the whole email, then I use zero bounce to go and clean up all my list. And it's funny because every step in a cold email campaign, you keep losing prospects. So at the beginning, the companies on angel.co, some of them, are dead. They went out of business. They were acquired. Anyway, those things happen and people just don't go and clean up their mess, for you on Angel List or the software or other services.
It's a bit like a marketing funnel or a sales funnel. At the top, you've always got more than at the bottom, and along the way, you're losing, but you're also getting closer to the dozen or so that really matter, that are going to end up on your show or something. So that's a good point. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's just part of the process.
Yeah, it does happen. And obviously, the next stage is you can't find everyone's email address. And then the next stage, obviously, some email will bounce. So once you got your list of people that you know are not going to bounce, then it's about time to import them into Quickmail. Well, that's my tool, so I'm not going to use a competitor's tool.
What's that?
Let's face it. Yeah, what's that? And once I import them, then it's time for me to build my campaign.
So at this point, you've got your ideal prospects sort of loaded in the hopper, so to speak. And you're reaching out to founders who have been funded. Now it's time to write some emails?
That's right.
All right.
So I created my campaign, and I got 3 steps currently in my campaign, actually 4.
Well, hold on. Now here's where I want to slow you down, because I sort of feel like this moment where you sit down with your scribe feather and a scroll to start writing your emails, I sort of feel like that's the most critical decision that us as copywriters and as salespeople to make, because we've got not only words that we can put together in different orders, but most importantly, an approach. We can completely change the ask, from, hey, I want you on my show, to, hey, did you start this from scratch? To, there's so many ways to enter a conversation. How did you decide to come up with what you came up with, and what did you come up with?
Okay, so my approach is not going to be super interesting for the show, because it's simply asking them to come on a show. Reason for it is because it worked so freaking well when you and I did that for the episode 100, that my assumption here is like, it's not so hard to stroke the ego of someone so they come on your show. Sad, but that's the case, right? People want or crave for attention.
We're simple creatures.
I know.
Okay, but I mean, that's good, because that's rooted in some psychology that we've probably mentioned on the show before. Something about, can you name it? Is it an influence factor or anything that we can put a name to?
I think it's Fox on a Crow. I think we covered that in episode 19, where we mentioned that, people are way more receptive and way more open to start a conversation with you if you compliment them.
And also, this is a lot of value, right? Like, it's not only status, which is probably 50% of the sell here, but it's also,
that's correct.
Oh, okay, so if I do this interview, it's going to be heard by thousands of people. I'll be exposed more, good for my brand, good for my bank account. There's a whole lot of value with very little on their end that they have to contribute.
That's 100% correct. And this is why I think that this may flop. And bear in mind that I have 250 prospects that are good to go, but I'm not going to blast 250 prospects in one go with that copy. I'm going to try it, maybe on 20 people, and then see if already a few people are replying and engaging with the content. If I receive too many, like not interested, whatever, I have to revisit my approach. And I'm fine with that. But
okay,
in the current state of things, I think that's worth, trying and seeing if I really need to invest way more effort into it or not. And the difficulty here comes from the fact that this is podcast that starts from scratch, so I may not have the audience and everything around. This is not mission impossible, but we're going to see how it's turning out. I'm believing that it could work.
I like how you double down on what's worked before. This is one of the first things that I try and uncover in a sales call. Is like, what have you done? What's working so that maybe you can repeat it instead of starting over, reinventing the wheel. Looking at past success, always a good idea. And like we mentioned, you've got a lot of value here. So as the saying goes, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. You're offering a lot of honey in this email. So I'm excited. Let's dive into some copy.
Sure. So here's the copy. The subject line is company name on podcast, ? Like we keep on saying on the show, it has to be a contract between the reader and the recipient. If they read that, they say like, okay, it's about, having my company mentioned on a podcast. So then they're going to read.
So far, so good.
So it's going to go like, hi, Jack. I'm going to use your name, Jack. The next line is a custom attribute, an intro. So I'm going to write something specific for each prospect.
So for example, it could be, hey, Jack, heard you on the podcast with Jeremy. Very cool stuff. Love the Fox and the Crow episode, right?
There you go.
There you go.
You nailed it.
Okay.
Would you be open to share your entrepreneur's journey on my podcast and how, insert company name, came to birth? ? A little about me. After co-hosting a podcast on Cold Email for more than 100 episodes, brackets, and still going strong, included the link of our podcast.
Nice.
I decided to launch another podcast dedicated to SaaS founders. As a SaaS founder myself, open brackets, although mine didn't raise any money, Quickmail.io, I aim for a very in-depth conversation focusing solely on you, and I think you would make a great guest. If you are game, just reply yes, and I'll let you know the next step. If not, just let me know. No hard feelings, smiley faces, signature, custom PS. Now, not all prospects will have a custom PS. It's only if they're in Zurich as well, or they're in Switzerland as well, or there is something that is very connecting me straight away with them, then I would probably put it into a PS specifically. It's just giving me room to do extra customization if I feel like it for a certain prospect.
Cool. Good stuff. So basically, the ask, of course, is to see if they would like to be a guest on the show. But what I want to point out, starting from the bottom, working to the top, is you didn't say, can we set up an interview time next Tuesday at 4 p.m.? Like you
for 5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's much softer than that. This way, they don't have to look at their calendar at all. They just have to know, are they interested or not? And to me, that's a good call to action because it's easy to reply to. And of course, there's a lot of value involved if they do respond to this email positively.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you thought this email could be a silver, maybe a gold, but it's not quite platinum. What do you think it's missing, Jeremy?
Oh, it's very simple. I can't, give them real benefit beside the one they can imagine themselves. So there is no mention about you're going to be listened by, 1,000 entrepreneurs, or people are going to be mad on buying your stuff, or whatever that is, more than just, I'm going to give you exposure on my podcast that is kind of unknown at the moment, right?
What's kind of cool is you're reaching out to startup guys. You're sort of inviting them to be part of your, beginnings of the podcast. I sort of feel like this audience is into that kind of stuff. It's like, this is brand freaking new. You could basically be one of the first guests as I start up this podcast, just like we both started up our software companies. I sort of feel like that's some kind of a value add that you might want to play on in follow-up emails, perhaps. You can call out like, hey, I do not have a huge audience I can tout, but, fill in the blank.
This is spot on, actually, because all the things we're saying are definitely good ammunition for the follow-ups. In a follow-up could be like, hey, understand that will be some of the first episodes. Would you be okay if I recontact you in 2 months once we got a little bit more, and then you can check it out yourself? Something like that. But again, sort of like persistence, nice.
Drill down a little bit more into credibility, because I'm hearing that you feel like you don't have enough credibility boosters at this stage because the podcast isn't really live yet.
Oh, hold on a second. I'm not saying that. That's exactly why I mentioned this is my second podcast and we've done 100 episodes. So it's just to show the seriousness, right, of the offer.
Okay. So in other words, you're leaning on previous successes, if you will, in order to position yourself as someone that is worthwhile to come on the show. I sort of think, and keep this in mind, this translates to if you're starting a new business, where if you've had success with a previous podcast, hey, we've reached over 100 episodes and 40,000 downloads, kind of cool. That tells me, even though this is a brand new podcast, that this guy sticks it out. So if he starts a podcast, it probably won't fizzle out after the 10th episode. And two, he's not recording this and just posting it on some obscure site. Like, it actually starts to get some traction. And I just want you listening to realize that even if you're brand new, this is your first company, if you've got 5 years of experience in the industry, for example, you can mention that as a way to position yourself above Joe Schmo, who's just completely new. There's always a way that you can position yourself as a point of authority, or at least a person worth engaging with, even if it's brand new.
Yeah, one cool thing that you're mentioning, I didn't actually mention the number of, unique downloads, specifically because it's hard to figure out, if you're not in a podcast world, you don't really know if this is a high number or not.
Yeah.
Right? It's is 40K actually big or is not big? I'm not quite sure how I should interpret it. But the thing I'm leaning a lot on is I'm also a SaaS founder, and they will be interviewed by someone who knows the stuff. Because how many times am I listening to, interviews of founders done by, like you say, Joe Schmoes from, that is a press guy that never actually tried any entrepreneurial thing on himself. But you know what I mean? It's we're going to have a conversation. We know what we're talking about together. And a lot of things that I picked up as a founder is that we do love to share things. We love to share our experience because it's a very solitary experience being a founder. So it's always good when we can just, give back to the community and so on. That may not happen in other industry or in different things. Like, for example, if you're trying to do a sales podcast, good luck for having your salespeople, sharing their tips with every other salespeople. So it may depend on industry, but I know I can sort of like lean on that because that's something that is common as a founder.
So is this something you may consider putting in as a follow-up email, is mentioning or just driving home the idea that it's one SaaS founder talking to another, completely different style than what they're used to?
Yeah, I got that line that says, as a SaaS founder myself, blah, blah, blah. But then, yes, that's true. I could reinforce it somewhere in one of the follow-ups. Like, hey, it's not a press conference. We're going to really deep dive into things, and what we're going to uncover is going to help other founders. That things really resonate with other founders as well. They like to give back.
And what's cool too is as you start talking to other founders, you can easily, once you have them on the phone or even better on your podcast, that's a chance to gather some feedback about the outreach approach, like what was it that made you reply? I mean, not necessarily on your podcast, but I really do like when somebody replies, like if I end up getting them on the phone and they're sort of, that you kind of get a pulse that they know what's going on. You just say, hey, like candidly, what made you reply? And there's always things in there that surprise me. So you can do that. And also something that you and I have done is after the show has been recorded, before you let them go, you say, hey, by the way, this was great. Is there anybody else in your world that you think would be an awesome guest as well? And sort of let that interview drive referrals. And so it just makes life easier.
Yeah, I'm pretty poor at doing that, but absolutely love doing that referral at the end.
Okay, so I have one more question for you. What does success look like for this campaign? Like, let's say you've got 250 prospects on this campaign. What are you looking for to determine win or lose, or if you have to go completely back to the drawing board?
I need a few replies. I would say I need like 10 replies total to get the sort of like show starting, because I'd like to record 10 interviews before I can start posting them. So if I got my 10 interviews, that means the show is live. That means things are online. And I can always come back to the other one and say, hey, check out those 10 episodes. 10 people already do it. That's social proof. And, more people maybe sway in that direction. So I would say getting 10 agreeing is a good thing, but I have to be aware that, like every stage in a funnel, you got less and less.
That's true.
So potentially I will need to get like 15 before it ends up being effectively recording 10 podcasts, and potentially even more, because out of those 15 I record, maybe a few of them could be duds in the end. So probably if I can get like 20, that'll be like...
That's gold.
That's super successful. I'll be happy with.
Yeah. So I just want to highlight that Jeremy's end goal here isn't a response rate or even a positive response rate. It's number of people booked on the show.
That's right.
And that's so critical, because it's very easy to say, oh, if I get a 15 or 20% reply rate, I'm a happy guy. Well, no, it doesn't really matter about your reply rate. Instead, it's far more exciting to judge a campaign based on the end result. So for me, a lot of the times it's revenue generated or ideally profit. And that is a great baseline to determine if you should double down or completely go back to the drawing board, not positive reply rate. Cool stuff.
Yeah, actually, even today, one agency was mentioning that they need to be able to send 500 emails a day for their business. And I was saying like, yeah, but how many replies do you need? If you don't tell me that, then, it's like, maybe you don't need 500 a day, if you want like 2-3 replies a day. If you're happy with 2-3 replies a day, then maybe a different approach will work better than, blasting everyone.
Exactly. Just think of that mentality shift as like, no, I need to send 500 new prospects a message every day compared to, okay, what are our revenue goals? Okay, how many clients do we need for this? Okay, how many?
Yeah, I need to calculate at this stage. It's too difficult for me, Jack.
But you know what I'm saying? Just like it's far more actionable to me when you think in terms of your end goal instead of just simply a reply rate or something that may help you get there.
I do. No, it's all good. It's, you're talking about like people are focusing way too much on either vanity metrics or metrics that are just not the right ones.
Exactly. And I think we've all been there before, but when you flip it over and you start thinking about that question a little bit differently, it buys you some more flexibility to figure out, okay, well, if I really only need 10 podcast guests, then maybe I can take a way more tactical approach with 250 prospects and just blow them away with the personalization that you may add. This kind of stuff is, I think, the easy way with cold email. It's just for so many reasons. Maybe this is a whole nother cast where we'll talk about personalization and how to freak someone out in a good way with a cold email so that you hit your numbers without the sweat.
Well said. So at the moment, you'll realize, I mean, Jack is looking at my campaign right now. You'll realize a few things. My campaign currently contains 3 steps. The first step is a task for me to personalize the prospect outreach. The second one is to send the email using the personalization, because that prospect.custom.intro, so that intro line customization is actually not yet written. That's why I got a task for doing it. And then the third one is just a wait of 3 days. Notice that I don't have my follow-up written yet. Reason for that is because maybe a lot of people will reply on a first email and I wouldn't need to follow up that much. And the other thing is, like, I'm a big advocate of doing the list you need to do at that stage. So I could always have 3 more days to think about what's a good follow-up based on the reply I'm going to receive. Maybe people are going to tell me, like, how long is your stuff going to take? I don't feel confident dedicating, 3 hours of my time. So maybe my follow-up for the one who didn't express this objection will be something like, it will only take, X amount of time.
One of these days, Jeremy's going to write a book on the lean cold email campaign. Ways to get it out. No, I love it. It's just get it out the door and in front of your prospects early and keep learning and adjusting. And yes, super great takeaway.
So here's the second thing you want to see, Jack. If can you actually read what's here?
Yeah, it said, tag bad fit should not be present. Delete.
It's a condition for carry on my campaign. Do you know why I use that?
Let me see. All right, I have an idea. As you go to personalize, maybe you go to their profile, you educate yourself when you want to write the custom intro sentence, and then there you learn that they're bad fit. You don't want them on their show. So you tag them as bad fit and boom, are eliminated.
That's exactly right. So what I do is I have my task personalization. I do exactly what Jack said. I'm going to check them out. And sometime I realize that actually, they're the CEO of 5 different companies, or the company that I picked up is actually their sort of like pet project, or it's not something that I'm interested, or simply, I figured out like this guy doesn't seem that interesting to get on a show. So I'm just going to tag that person with you bad fit. And that way I don't need to sort of like go through removing them from my campaign or, doing all those sort of things around. I just leave it here and then it just carries on.
That's very cool. And this is nice because if you're handing this off to a VA, it's kind of, I don't want to use the word dummy proof, but it is. Mm-hmm. Just because it's one at a time and it's either like fill in the personalization or tag as bad fit. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I could effectively have my task being assigned to someone else in my team who will then filter those people. That way, I can just go ahead, insert the prospect into the campaign and say, you know what, Bob, John, Lisa, whatever, go ahead and then just go through your task and make sure that this person is a good fit for the show. And this is what I'm looking for. Please add me the introduction, the personalization line that I need. So basically, at least with my version of Quickmail, we can have like a process.
Which isn't available to us mortals yet.
That's right, because it's the next version anyway. But that means that I can really put a process around all that stuff. Like someone's going to do the personalization for me. Someone's going to look at the prospect, set the tag on them and do the line and stuff like that. So I really love that if the show starts to go very well, I can have other people in my team taking over some parts of my cold email campaign.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of systems, and that's why I kind of think this is some cool stuff here. So maybe we do a follow-up when you've got some stats coming in. If you learn anything interesting, I'll have to see if you're up for a little follow-up episode to recap and find out what's new with this campaign here.
Definitely will do that, and I'll be happy to drop the name of the podcast once I figure it out. One more thing before we leave is I started the campaign this afternoon, maybe 4 hours ago. And already I got my first reply that says, yeah, sure thing. Always up for networking and getting the word out. Let me know next steps. Thanks, Mark.
Nice. All right. Yeah, I'm looking at the screen share as we speak. I can verify that's a legit reply from a pretty big deal company. So kudos, Jeremy.
I don't know the company, which is pretty cool. It's like I've got no idea about this company. So now I have to educate myself about this company. What did I say, actually? Love your product. I used to work in a different branch of finance, 6 years working with market makers and option trading. Good memories. That was my intro line.
Cool. Building a bridge, work in a similar industry. That's good. Yeah, so it looks like cold email still works then.
All right, so I'll let you know how the campaign is going. Thanks, Jack, for the help here.
Yeah, Jeremy, well done. You've already got good replies coming in, so get after it, and we'll come back to this campaign maybe in a few episodes to see where you're at. This is good stuff.
Yeah, who knows? Sounds good. Thanks, Jack.
Awesome, Jeremy. Bye. As always, Jeremy had some great nuggets to take away from this episode. Here's a couple of my notes that I find worth keeping in mind here. First off, you need to pay attention to list building. Whether you take the snowball approach where you start small and work your way to the top prospects, or take Jeremy's persistence approach, either way, you need to find a targeted list before you start writing your emails. Next, double down on what's worked in the past. Remember how Jeremy had a good response when he invited people to his previous podcast? Well, no need to reinvent the wheel, repeat what works. Next, use credibility and authority. You can always have an edge, even when you're starting from scratch. There's always a way to position yourself as somebody worth replying to. Couple more here. Focus on personalization is always a good idea. And finally, you need to keep your end goal in mind. Remember, Jeremy had a goal to reach out and book 10 people for his new podcast. That's very different than saying my goal with this campaign is to get, let's say, a 30% reply rate. That's not going to give you anything tangible. The 10 podcast guests will. So always boil down your end goal to something concrete that matters, like revenue generated. Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast.
So they can send awesome emails.
And make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.